Salim, can you hear me?
Hi, Irene.
I pursued it and it eventually let me in.
Okay, that's good. Good to see you here. Just
Have you received the slides yet?
yeah, I just received the link and I'll be uploading the document. Okay, just a second,
Okay.
please.
Don't worry.
Okay. Okay, Irene, I get it now. So I will be Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, I'd like to welcome you, Ece Hocam. Nice to see you here.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Irene, do you hear me, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning. It's nice to see you here. We will be broadcasting this session live on YouTube as well. And we have audience joining us from YouTube in addition to Microsoft Teams. Okay, then before we start our session, I'd like to start recording here on Teams as well. Okay, I just started recording here. And I'll be uploading the presentation that will be leading us today for our discussion. And then I guess we can start talking about predatory publishers. Okay, it's almost there. I hope you can see the presentation for predatory publishers. It's my great pleasure today to host Dr. Irene Glendinning from Coventry University of the UK. I've been working with Irene for the last 6 years, and we have been working a lot on the promotion of academic integrity under European Network for Academic Integrity. We'd like to dedicate this session to our late professor Ismail Hakkı Erten. Together with Irene, we had the opportunity to visit him 2 years ago in his office. That's why we are dedicating this session on predatory publishers, criticizing white and blacklists to our professor Ismail Hakkı Erten. Let me briefly mention about our outline today, what we are supposed to be doing. First, I'd like to briefly introduce Dr. Irene Glendinning to you by referring to her recent research interest. And then we will try to identify what we mean by potentially predatory publishers and how we'd like to provide some strategies, how we can distinguish reputable publishers from disreputable ones. And as academics, what can we do about it in order to avoid them? We'd like to share some sample call for papers, and then we'd like to discuss what might be wrong, why we would potentially consider them as potentially predatory publishers. And of course, at the end of the session, we will have question and answer section. So please feel free to ask your questions either during the presentation, or you can leave your questions to the end of the session. Questions are welcomed also from the participants joining us from YouTube as well. Before we start, I'd like to remind you an important notice, citation notice about this presentation. As you know, this is Academic Integrity Policies course. For this presentation, we benefited mainly from two earlier presentations, one by Irene Glendinning, the other my own presentation. So if you'd like to cite any sources, we will strongly recommend you to refer to the original sources, because the notes here will be functioning as lecture notes guiding us throughout the session. Okay, then let me briefly introduce who Dr. Glendinning is. She's working for Coventry University, and she's academic manager for student experience there. And she has been working for the Office of Teaching and Learning there. She dedicated almost the last 3 decades to higher education. She started working as a lecturer in computer science. And for the last decade, she has been managing different academic portfolios, ranging from undergraduate to postgraduate, including international partnerships. She became principal investigator and project manager for Erasmus-funded project. In her project, she investigated the impact of policies for plagiarism in higher education across Europe, and later she was involved in other related projects considering academic integrity and prevention of plagiarism. Okay then. Before I leave the word for Irene, I'd like to call your attention to a working group that we have under European Network for Academic Integrity. The name of the working group is Integrity in Academic Dissemination and Publishing. And our main aim and mission with this working group is reducing the impact of disreputable publishers and fraudulent academic conferences. I'm glad to inform you that Dr. Irene Glendinning is heading this group. So if you're interested in joining this group, you may email Irene, and you may check in our webpage working groups there. You will find more relevant information about the group there. Okay then. Today, as I said previously, our main focus will be how to avoid from predatory publishers. Within this perspective, we'd like to raise your awareness about academic publishing options and threats, both options and threats, and we'd like to provide some practical examples how to avoid them, and then tell the differences between scholarly and poor quality journals, publishers, and conferences. Okay, Irene, the stage is yours. Will you please briefly introduce what we mean by academic publishing, please?
Thank you very much, Salim, for the introduction. I hope you can all hear me. I am clicking on the take control button, but it's not. Oh yes, I think it's working now. So, welcome everyone. I'm going to go through. First of all, I'm going to start by just introducing the concepts of publishing, in case some of you are not familiar with the terms and some of the concepts that are within publishing. So I think most of you will be familiar with the big companies, and I've listed a few of them there. There are many, many more, and they all have different publishing models. But one of the big reasons for the rise of predatory, potentially predatory, and I'll explain why we say potential in a few minutes, but one of the reasons for the rise of these companies is the onset of open access publishing. And so we need to understand what open access publishing is about and how it affects and how it gives rise to these companies. So first of all, in addition to lots of very large companies, there are lots of specialist-based journals as well. So if you go into any kind of any whitelist, you'll see hundreds and thousands of different journals, and they all have slightly different variations of the publishing models. And the publishing models determine various things. They determine who pays. So somebody has to pay for publishing. Somebody has to pay the cost of publishing. And it varies depending on whether it's the author who pays, the reader who pays. It could be that the researcher pays, or the institution of the author will pay. So the green open access is a model whereby there is normally an embargo period. So once the article is published, it's only published in a behind a paywall generally. So someone has to pay for it. So generally the reader has to pay for it in order to access it. But the author is allowed to freely publish a copy of the piece of work, a version of the piece of work, on their own archive, so that they can give access to their colleagues and to other researchers before the embargo period is over. And the period of the embargo, it could be 6 months, it could be a year. And that's to ensure that the publishing company has time to recoup some money from people who want urgent access before it's generally freely available. And then they lose the opportunity to make money out of it. The gold open access is generally free access from the point of publication, but somebody has to pay for that. And it could be that there is an article publishing charge that maybe the author has to pay, or the researcher, and so on. There are also other ones, other models. There's a hybrid. I don't have any details of the hybrid one, but the platinum one, generally it's paid for by other beneficiaries or other sponsors. If you want to read a bit more about that, there is a source there that you can go in and read about the different models. But it's important that when you publish, you understand what the model is that applies to your particular journal or your particular publishing company. So they all have their own variations of that. And the whole point of this is it's not about restricting access. It's about the publisher covering their costs and making money. And so that the article processing and publishing charge is the issue, and who pays. So that's what the models are all about. Open access is very, very important. It's maybe obvious to you, but if you think about the current situation with the COVID-19, all the publications and all the research that's going on relating to that, it's really important that it's in the public domain. Anything that's really key is in the public domain immediately, because if it's not in the public domain, people are not going to learn from your research and build on that research. So the quicker you can get the information out there, the better. But if everything is just freely available on the point of publication, the publisher will lose money. But these big publishing companies make a lot of money, so they make money through all of these restrictions that are placed on the author and on the publications themselves. And I'll say a little bit more about that as we go through. There are things called there are different factors, there are different metrics that are used, but one of them is the journal impact factor, JIF, is a Web of Science one, and that's often used and cited as a measure of how the kind of the value of the journal itself. But the problem with all of these factors is that they can be faked, or different measures are used by these disreputable journals in order to inflate their value. So it's important that you look at that. Again, there's a reference there you can look at if you want to find out more about that. I won't go into detail there. So to get over this problem, there is something that's come up fairly recently called preprint servers. Now, what these are publishing means by which papers are published online without going through peer review. And so these are, the whole purpose of these is to get them to market immediately. And so that they go through, or they should go through, the papers should go through some kind of editorial checks to make sure they are sensible before they're published. But there's no guarantee that happens. But they haven't been through peer review. And the idea is that they will go through public peer review once they're available online. And it's a way of kind of bypassing this problem of the embargo. But the problem with this is that unless you actually recognise that what you're looking at is something that hasn't been through peer review, it's possible that you can cite these articles as if they've been peer reviewed, as if they're reliable, whereas in fact they need to go through that public peer review process. So these are relatively new. We're talking about within the last 5 years or so. Sally will contradict me if I'm wrong on any of this information, but I think it's possibly about 5 years ago this all started. And they're quite common in the area of physics research and also medical research. But it's really important that people don't accept these as being peer reviewed, because if they do, they may be building on research that's not reliable. So there are issues there to do with understanding what it is you're reading, whether it's been through peer review, whether it's reliable research, whether it's actually been peer reviewed by experts within the field or not. And what happens if research is found to be unreliable by any means? And it could be that the author themselves has found faults within their research. So, there are perfectly legitimate reasons why you might want to withdraw a piece of academic writing, and that's called a retraction. But also retractions happen because someone else spots that there is a problem, and it could be that the peer reviewers didn't spot something, and someone later spots it. So typically you will approach, if you spot something wrong with a paper, where there might be some inaccuracy, it might be some fraudulent practice within the research itself, or it might be a deliberate attempt to deceive, and you can actually go and ask for a retraction. And if you want to see some examples of retractions, you can go onto the Retraction Watch website and have a look at the retraction, the list of retractions there and why they happened and so on. So that's just a very, very brief overview of the kinds of things that are happening in publishing. I haven't spoken there about whether things are in print or whether things are online, because, of course, when things are online, they can be accessed immediately. Whereas when things are in print, you have to actually acquire a physical copy and pay for that copy. So quite a lot of the funding that comes to the big publishing companies in particular comes from university library subscriptions. There's been quite a lot of discussion recently and a lot of objections recently, because the companies have put up their subscription charges, and some of the big libraries, the universities and the big consortia of libraries in the States and in Germany and in the UK have tried to challenge the rise in the actual subscription charges. So those are generally relating. They used to be related to print copies of the different journals, but nowadays they relate to online copies as well. So that's just a brief overview of that. So I'm going to try and move slides, see if that works. Oh, it worked. Oh, jolly good, that worked. I was kind of half expecting a problem there, but that's great. So just a little bit now about what this article processing charge and the subscription charge pays for. So I did some interviews a few years back with various publishing companies and challenged them about these kind of fees and the different charges and so on, because particularly the big companies are making a lot of money from publishing. That's what they're all about. But they're highly successful companies. And actually, if you look at this slide, you'll see that a lot of the roles involved in publishing are volunteers. So editors generally don't get paid anything by the companies. They work for free. They work because it's their academic duty. Editorial board members don't get paid, but they do quite a lot of the work. They do quite a lot of the organisation of and the strategy behind the publishing, and also the editorial board quite often is involved in the peer reviews, and the peer reviewers don't get paid either. They do it for the kind of reciprocal, because people peer review their papers and they peer review other people's. I quite like being a peer reviewer. I think it's quite a nice thing to do, because you get an early view of the research that's coming forward and you're able to put something into the skills of young researchers and help them to develop their writing style. And I had a lot of help when I started academic writing from peer reviews. I learned a lot by the feedback from peer reviews. But peer reviews can be quite awful, so you can get quite dreadful peer reviews, and you have to learn to take quite negative reviews and look at them in a constructive way and learn from them. But also authors don't get paid for what they do. So when you look at the kind of volunteering, what is it that the companies do that actually get the fees and the article and the charges and so on that they? So what they do is they register the work, they curate, they control the kind of evaluation of the work, and they disseminate and publicise the publications, and they provide a permanent archive. So the archive is really quite important, because if you've published, you want your work to be available forever. And it's important that you understand what they do, because one of the things that singles out the predatory publishing companies and the disreputable publishing companies is they don't provide these services, or they pretend to provide them, but that they actually don't provide them. So if you want your work to be there forever, if you've used a predatory publishing company, it's highly unlikely that work will be available for somebody to access in a few years' time, because they don't provide that kind of permanent archiving. A lot of these companies come and go, and therefore they're not kind of permanent archives. So it's quite important. So they do provide all these services, and the interviews that I did with one of the big publishing companies, they were very defensive about what the value of their services and why the charges that they and the fees that they levy can be justified. But also it's important to realise that science is funded through research councils and research bodies. And a lot of that money goes into research and publication and into the publishing companies themselves. So it's actually quite important that publishing works well, because if it doesn't work well, then we don't have this archive of research that we can refer back to and we can access. Because if you think about it, in every publication you have a list of references. But if those references are not reliable, if they don't exist in 5 years' time, then it's impossible to go back through that research and locate the sources on which that research depended. So they do actually satisfy quite an important and, well, a very important role within the publishing process. So the term itself, we say potentially predatory publishers simply because there is no strict definition of what predatory publishing means, and not everyone likes the term. So some people call them disreputable publishers, or some people call them other names. But essentially, what we're referring to here is publishing companies or journals that are in it just for the money. They don't provide all those services I've described on the previous slide. And the term was coined by a gentleman called Geoffrey Beale. Now, Geoffrey is, again, I've met Geoffrey, and so has Salim. He's a lovely man, a really interesting person. He was a librarian at the University of Colorado, Denver, USA, and he's now retired. And if you follow him on Twitter, you'll see he likes photography, and he goes to some really interesting places and takes photographs of where he's been. So he's no longer working as a librarian, but he's still actively tweeting. So if you want to try and follow him, he's there. He listed, what he did was, and the reason he's famous is that he created a blacklist, and his blacklist listed potential, possible, or probable predatory scholarly publishers who should not be used by reputable researchers. But the question is, how do we identify and how do we distinguish between what are really predatory publishers who are out to just get your money and provide no service in return, or just disreputable companies that don't actually provide the right kind of services or good quality services, and genuine predatory publishers. So there's no agreement on the terminology, and not everybody likes that term. And as the slide says here, deceptive publishing is another term that's used. So, but essentially, my guidance to you on this, and we'll go through a few examples, is if there's anything dodgy about this company, just don't publish there, because they could be predatory. That one of the great advantages, though, of predatory publishers is that they publish very quick, and so you don't have to wait. So if you go through peer review, which is the right way to do it, and to get good science out there, it takes time, and therefore, if people want to get to market quickly, then that's a good reason for using predatory publishers. But they actually have article processing charges that can be quite steep. They can be quite expensive. I've come across some that have quite low charges. That isn't necessarily the case that they always charge really expensive charges. Sometimes they don't actually publish what their charges are, and then they bill you with it later. But essentially, a predatory publisher works on the basis of fakery and deceit. So they pretend they're something they're not. So they're trying to make money out of publishing without the quality, without the services that I've described. And they pretend to be listed on various schemes, on various metrics, various indexes, and they make fraudulent claims about what they're listed on. So you can't accept everything on face value. So they use the author pays model. Okay, so they will charge something, and that money just goes straight into the running of the company. So their actual costs are very low, because they just simply run a website and they just advertise through email, through other kinds of social media. But generally, academics get lots of emails from these journals, and they're just bombarded with them all the time. So that's one of the signs that they're predatory. If you're constantly getting emails from the same companies, that's one of the signs that they might be predatory, because reputable journals don't necessarily constantly bombard academics with offers for publication. So, as it says here, they consider money far more important than any kind of ethical conduct. Okay, so how do reputable? I'm just looking at the slides, and I think this is where Salim will come back in at this point. So I'm going to stop presenting at this point. Is that right? And Salim will come back in here. Salim, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you.
See that? I think you should have control now.
Yeah, I have the control, but I'm afraid I need to reload the presentation.
I pressed the wrong button then.
Okay. I just reloaded it, and
we'll look at you in the meantime.
Okay. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you for the clarification to identify the line between reputable and disreputable publishers. Within this respect, it is good to know what reputable publishers are doing, what they are offering. On the other hand, what irreputable or potentially predatory ones are doing or claiming to be doing here. Within this perspective, especially, I'd like to refer to a model employed by a reputable publisher, so that we can identify the characteristics of peer review or submission model, how it works for reputable journals. Let me show you the figure from Tyler and Francis. Just a second, please. So any reputable journal might be following a peer review process. It could be single peer review, double peer review. It means that there will be at least 2 reviewers. Or it could be blind peer review, which means that the reviewer and the authors do not know each other, or sometimes the authors do not know about the reviewer, but the reviewers know about the author, the identity of the author. Any type of peer review model could be acceptable as long as it makes sense. Now let's see the sample here, how it works for Taylor and Francis here. At the first step, the editor receives the paper, and then what happens? At the second stage, the editor pre-screens. This is a pre-editorial stage before sending it out for the review. The editor, by considering the aims of the journal, the scope of the journal, checks the relevance of the paper. If it fits within the expectations of the journal, readership of the journal, and it seems to be promising for the editor, then the editor sends it to the reviewers. Usually there will be 2 or 3 reviewers assigned for each paper, and the review will be given sometime between 2 weeks, sometimes to 5 or 6 weeks. So it will be depending on the expectation of the journal here. And then the reviewers will read the paper very carefully, providing hopefully constructive feedback in order to develop the paper and suggestions and recommendations for the editor. At the 5th step, it will be the editor's responsibility to check what reviewers are suggesting. And considering their suggestions and recommendations, it will be the editor who will be deciding what to do with this paper. The options are the editor may accept the publication as is, or the editor may ask for minor revisions, or may ask for major revisions, or reject it. Of course, the editor will be taking the suggestions of the reviewers into consideration. And then if any revision is asked from the author, then the editor will contact the authors and ask for revisions. And then after minor or major revisions, there might be a second round if necessary. Any forthcoming rounds would be applicable before the paper moves to the production stage. So as you see, here's an interaction between the editor, the author, and the reviewers. The editor is directing this interaction and responsible for the safety of the interaction here. And this process teaches all partners, especially to the authors. If they are receiving high quality feedback, they can develop their papers and they can avoid some mistakes or errors before publication. So peer review process is very important. But what about predatory publishers? As Irene already acknowledged, predatory publishers or potentially predatory publishers, they do not have such processes. They might be claiming that they manage peer review processes, but when we check their processes very carefully, we can understand that their promises cannot be real. Usually, they will be promising for very fast peer review processes. Sometimes 3 days, sometimes 1 week, or sometimes up to 2 weeks. Which means that it would be impossible for any editor to pre-screen the manuscript and then find relevant, high-qualified reviewers, ask them to read the paper and provide feedback, and then send it back to the editor and finalize the process. So if any journal is promising a fast peer review process within a week, for example, then probably there will be high concerns related to becoming of a potentially predatory publisher. And they usually end the process as publish as is. So could be very dangerous, because if a novice author is submitting any manuscript, it means that probably there will be some issues that should be corrected before publication, and especially early career researchers here will not be benefit from the experiences of the other senior researchers here, considering the discrimination between asymmetrical and symmetrical feedback. There will be no high quality feedback, and considering zone of proximal development and scaffolding for the legitimate publishers, we can identify scaffolding. I mean, experienced reviewers are helping early career researchers to become better authors, better academic writers. But for predatory publishers, there will be no such contribution. So this would be problematic. Okay, then we move to the other question. Why do predatory journals exist? Before I leave the word for Irene here, I will specifically ask for contribution from our PhD students. Irene, is this okay for you if we encourage them to talk about it before we discuss why they exist? If we all
absolutely. Let's ask the question. Ideas.
Okay, so our students, why do you think predatory journals exist? Could you please respond to this with some expressions? What do you think? Hatice, please.
So maybe I should start. They exist for money, of course, as far as I know. But who they get the money from? If that's the question, why do researchers prefer to publish their works in such journals? Is this the question? Maybe.
I guess how do they exist? On what basis would anyone want to use a predatory journal?
Can you please repeat? Couldn't understand.
Would anyone want to use a predatory journal if they're so bad?
Okay, so as we are all aware, there's this publish or perish pressure, stress on researchers. They have to do some kind of publishing. So because they cannot produce worth publications, papers that can be published in not predatory ones, they would, of course, feel that they have to apply to these kinds of journals because they have to do some kind of publication. So they have to get some points, for example, in Turkey, or also we have this kind of academic incentive thing. If you gather enough points yearly, you can also receive some money for your publications from the government. That's another issue, I think.
It's in other countries as well. Yes, they get bonuses for that's good.
Yes,
absolutely right. Any other thoughts? Anyone else? No one else. Okay, let's move on then, shall we? Okay. So I'm going to take control at this point, and I'll try not to lose the slides next time. There's a little lag between pressing the button and something happening. So, okay, let's have a look and see what the next slide says then. So if we look at the first bullet point and the sub-points there, so there are, if we look at technological advances, particularly use of online, use of the web, some university libraries are less funded than they used to be. Academics searching for not just tenure position but also employment as well, and postgraduate students growing in numbers. So all of those factors are are contributors to the rise in predatory journals and the rise in the number of kind of disreputable journals springing up, because there's money to be made from all of these reasons. So if these are what I call perverse incentives. So if universities or even kind of national systems, such as in China and, as you say, also in Turkey, provide incentives for academics to publish more, and they don't specify the quality of that publishing medium that they use, then this kind of publish or perish, as the previous person said, that kind of regime will force academics to rely on journals that will publish their work. It takes a very long time to get published through a reputable journal, and there's a lot of papers are good quality papers are rejected for all sorts of reasons. So if you need to get published and you have to get published, in some cases there is no alternative than to use these journals. So all of these contributed to open access publication, but they also contributed to the rise of predatory journals. So if you need fast publication, that's the way to go. But the problem with that is anyone going to read your paper? Is it getting to the right audience? But we certainly know from the numbers at the bottom there, and there's a reference there you can refer to, there is a huge demand for these services, and a lot of people are using them. And it's possible some people that are using them are not aware of the fact these are predatory, but some people are perfectly aware of what these are, and they're happy to pay the charge in order to get their publication, the number of publications up. So the next slide then. So this is more or less what I said in the last slide, isn't it, really? So the publish ignorance. But also these incentives, the fact that some people get bonuses, some people need them to get employed in the first place, some people need them to get tenure. So I did a trip to Kosovo, and in order to become a professor, you have to have a publication record. You have to have a number of publications. Doesn't matter where they're published, you just have to have the number. And so naturally, in order to get that number of publications, people were using these predatory journals to get that number up. And there was a big scandal there. And that's why I met Geoffrey Beale, because he was in Kosovo to try to educate the professors and the academics there not to use these kind of journals. And so I was there talking about integrity and corruption, and he was there talking about predatory journals. So the big problem we've already covered this to some extent, but it's worth emphasising it here. The big problem is lack of peer review. So things get published that are not checked, and therefore, as Geoffrey Beale calls it, it's pseudoscience. So you get all sorts of things published that are not genuine science, and those things get out there in the public domain, and they're cited by other researchers, and people build on this shaky research and all completely fake research. And there's been some really good exposures where people have actually sent nonsense papers to these journals, and they've been published, and they make no sense at all, including one where I think he put his dog as the author. So there's been some quite funny ones, but for quite a serious reason. And one of the big problems is that they will publish anything, regardless of topic. So I quite often get sent agricultural journals, to publish. And I'm not, I'm a computer scientist, or I'm an educational researcher. I don't know anything about agriculture. So there's no specialist focus. They will actually publish anything, but there's nobody reading these journals because they're not worth reading. So you might get published there, you might get a tick on the number of publications, but nobody's going to read your work. Nobody's going to benefit from your research if it's genuine research. And plus the fact it's not going to be there necessarily in 2 years' time. And so And that's a quote from the interview with Jeffrey Beale. Pseudoscience gets published and people think it's genuine. So the question is then, how can we recognise them? So let's start to look at that. What a predatory journal looks like if you haven't seen one already. So this is actually referring to some examples provided, and I've got some links coming up on a slide that I'm going to try and open up. I'll open up one or two of them for you, and see if you can work out what the signs are. But with the examples, I think you need to look at what gives you confidence. So these are the questions that you need to ask. What gives you confidence that this publisher or this journal is reputable? So you're looking for signs, but don't be deceived. There are some things on these websites that are, and on the emails that you get, that are fake. So it pretends to be something it's not. But also, so you need to look for what are the positive signs, but what are the negative signs? So those are the questions you need to ask when you. So here's a list of the kinds of things you need to be looking at, and then we'll have a look at some examples. So you can ask your colleagues, do you know this journal? Have you published in this journal? Have you ever read any articles from this journal? Are the articles good articles? So can you go to the website? Can you find anything that they've published? Is there anything in your subject area published? And is it useful? Is it good stuff? So you can actually go in and check for yourself. Can you contact the publisher? Who is the publisher? And are there names there? Is it displayed on the website? Is the name that you've been given different from the one on the website? Is there an email? Is there a telephone number? Is there a location where the publisher is based? And quite often you'll find that they're based in either the USA or the UK, or in a kind of Western country. But actually, when you look at the names on there, they're not from those countries. They're from somewhere else. Is the journal clear about peer review? Does it say there is peer review? Just because it says it doesn't mean it happens. But actually, do they mention it at all? What is the indexing? Do they say they claim they're indexed? And can you follow up on that, and can you verify that they are indexed in the services that they say they are? Can you find them on a whitelist? And we'll talk about whitelists in a few minutes. Are they clear about how much it will cost you? So do they state what the fees are? And just because it's a small fee, it doesn't mean it's genuine. But also, if they don't say what the fees are, it's very likely there will be fees. And do they explain what the fees are for, and how they will be charged, and when they'll be charged? One of my great hobbies is going and finding the editorial board. So if you click on one of these websites and you search the editorial board, and you'll find all sorts of really reputable people on these editorial boards. And do you know who these people are? Are they people who are experts in the field? And if you can be bothered to chase up, and I've done this quite a few times. So if you find somebody who looks really reputable, if you can actually go to their own website, to their own university, can you contact that person? Do they know they're on the editorial board? And everyone I've ever contacted who I've done this with has come back and said they have no idea, that they don't know this journal, and they've no idea that we're listed as an editorial board member. So what they do is they have a fake editorial board. They might not even have heard about the journal. And if they do know about the journal, they wouldn't want to be listed in that journal. The other factor to note is that are they a member of the Committee on Publication Ethics Code, and do they subscribe to their standards? and if they don't, that's a good sign that they might not be reputable. So there's quite a long list there. So let's talk a little bit about blacklists and whitelists. So Beale's list was a blacklist, and Beale suddenly stopped his list in about, I think it was about 2017, something like 16, 17.
Yes, 2017, Irene.
right. Yeah, he stopped his list. He just abruptly decided he wanted to stop his list. And when I asked him about that, he told me it was because of pressure from his own institution, which is interesting. Which nobody thought that was the reason, but that's what he said was the main reason why he stopped his list. But actually, his list was taken over by someone else, and because one of the reasons why blacklists are problematic and running your own blacklist is problematic is that you get threatened by publishers. If you put people on the blacklist, they will threaten to sue you. They'll take litigation against you. But someone else has actually taken over his list. So I went on to it a couple of days ago, and that link there actually will take you to a new list which builds on Beale's list, and that is being maintained by someone else. But the people who are maintaining it have not said who they are, and they're anonymous. But there is a blacklist there that's built on Beale's list, and that existed a couple of days ago. That was there. Now, the whitelist approach, you're equally likely to be sued if you have a whitelist, because people want to be on a whitelist. If they're not on there, they will demand to know why they're not on there. There are various whitelists, and some of them are there, listed there. So whitelist is obviously a list, I think, obviously a list of good sites. But a lot of other lists are grey lists, where they will contain a mixture of both reputable and suspect websites. So Cabell's is both. It claims to be a blacklist and a whitelist at the same time, and it uses 60 indicators of what it how it defines what a blacklist is. But some of those indicators might also implicate sites that are kind of young publishers that haven't quite got their act together, and it can be quite devastating for a newly established publishing company to be blacklisted, because it can have implications on their success. You can also use Google Scholar and Google Search to find journals, and because they will find good as well as bad. So they are kind of grey lists, I guess, is the term that's used to describe those. So, but whitelists also, as I said, are likely to be the target of publishing companies if they're not listed, or if they are listed on a blacklist. So the problems with any of the lists is that some poor quality journals are included in real indexes and Scopus and so on, and in the directory of open access journals as well. And there's an article there. I think Bohannon was the chap who sent a kind of bogus paper to quite a number of journals, and had it published in quite a number of those journals. I've forgotten the numbers now. I think is that right, Salim? Was he the chap that sent a bogus paper and had it? Quite a lot of these journals that he sent it to publish the paper unseen, which shows that they really don't have peer review if they didn't pick up the problems. So the publisher websites and the content of emails might be inaccurate, misleading, or fraudulent. So even if it looks genuine, it might not be. And one of the big problems is, even if they claim to conduct peer review, it might not be carried out, or might lack rigour. And they often invent indexes, or they use indexes that they've invented themselves, and therefore they actually have control of their own indexes. So they claim to be indexed, but the actual indexes are not genuine indexes in the same way. And as I said to you earlier on, the editorial boards, what they do is they go on to, what I mean by harvested is they will go to people's own websites, and they'll think, oh, that's a good person to have on the editorial board. So they will just simply take the CV from the editorial board and they'll paste it on their own websites. And that's how they will create these editorial boards. And these people don't know anything about the fact that they're on the editorial boards. So more clues. So they will often call themselves international, or American, or the British, and they'll use names that are very similar to really genuine high-class journals. as I said, fake impact factors, fake metrics. You'll get lots of emails from the companies once again and again and again, and they will publish very often and very regular. So the subject invitation, I said before, I quite often get them from the Agriculture and Forestry journal. You know, I don't know anything about those subjects, and I will get invitations to publish in those kind of journals. If you look very carefully, you'll find that the grammar and the spelling on these websites is quite often bad. A lot of these companies come from countries like India. And although they speak English, they have non-native English spelling and grammar, and you'll find that there are all sorts of errors in there if you look very carefully. They often use Yahoo emails and Gmails rather than emails that are corporate type of emails, and that's not necessarily something to hang your hat on, but it can often be a sign that these are not genuine companies. Although they have addresses in the UK and USA, for example, they will operate elsewhere. So if you check the URLs and you check the origin of where these emails have come from, you will find that they've come from other countries. Lack of clarity, we've said. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So we talked about journals, but often these are conferences as well. So you may be invited to conferences associated with journals, and you may be invited to be a part of the editorial board, keynote speaker, all sorts of honorary positions. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So those are clues that there's something wrong. And there's some additional tips, and there's a reference there you can refer to. I'm going to hand back very soon. There's just one more slide for me, and then I'm going to hand back. I'll try not to lose the slide next time, Salim. So the problem with black and white lists, I think I've covered most of these, is they often get so if you want to set up your own blacklist or whitelist, for example, you are open to litigation by publishers. Published by the publisher journals that either want to be in them or don't want to be in them, depending on whether it's black or white. There is no consensus as how it's defined. Those 6 factors from Cabell's is something to go on, but not everyone agrees, and it can actually ensnare genuine journals, so it's very difficult to distinguish them. The impact factors and the criteria are different, and one of the big things is that there is a huge demand for these. You can see from the number of publications that go through them, there is a big demand, and where there's demand, there will be supply, particularly where there's money to be made. And if you want to set up your own list, it's a really difficult job keeping your list up to date and making sure because these companies pop in and out of existence. So I'm going to pass it over to Salim now. Great. Okay, that worked this time. So I didn't press the button this time. So over to you, Salim. Salim, we can't hear you. Are you muted still?
So sorry. Okay, thank you for clarifying what we mean by black and white lists, and also you mentioned about gray lists. Considering this, we said that potentially predatory publishers are encouraging or seem to be encouraging interdisciplinary studies. However, we need to be very careful about interdisciplinary studies. Of course, interdisciplinary studies should be beneficial for the development of the science, because at different fields we are studying different things. So the researchers in other fields, they may not be aware of the recent developments in different fields. Therefore, cooperation among different sciences, the different fields could be beneficial. But for this cooperation, we need an umbrella term. For example, I am an applied linguist, and Irene is a computer scientist. So what brings us together? I mean, what might be my cooperation, my collaboration with Irene? We need an umbrella term. Here, for example, this was our motivation for the European Network of Academic Integrity. We were all coming from different countries and coming from different fields. So we tried to have consensus on academic integrity. I mean, our understanding of academic integrity should not change from country to country. I mean, there shouldn't be any changes, any cultural changes, or there shouldn't be changes with regards to different fields. Therefore, we found academic integrity as an umbrella term bringing us together. If there is such an umbrella term that brings you together with some other researchers from the other fields, then interdisciplinary studies will be beneficial. However, if there is no such an umbrella term, then there is no point with such collaboration. Okay, then considering this in mind, I'd like to show you an example invitation that I received only 6 days ago. Okay, you see the invitation here, it's in Turkish, so I'll provide basic information for those who cannot speak Turkish. It is an invitation to open invitation to any scientist they call so, and they indicate that they are planning to publish a special issue in December 2020 for Ambient Science. That's the name of the journal, and the theme of the special issue is physical education and sports. The deadline for sending manuscripts is 25th November 2020, and they provide a Gmail address, so they will be accepting manuscript submissions through Gmail. And they provide information about the journal, as you see here. The name of the journal is Ambient Science, and they claim that the journal is indexed by Emerging Sources Citation Index. So we should consider it highly credible because it's included in Web of Science. After receiving this email, they claim that we need to send manuscripts by 25th November, and they will be publishing in December. So there is less than a month to publish such a special issue for Web of Science journal. I checked the journal webpage. This is the journal webpage, as you see here. They also claim that they are indexed by Thomson Reuters Web of Science, and they provide some other numbers here, WhatsApp numbers, for example, for contact information. So it seems to be legitimate with regards to their claims. And I checked it from master journal list from Web of Science group. And I confirmed that Ambient Science is included in their list. Here you can see ISSN numbers, and I checked these numbers. I matched these numbers with the numbers given. So the numbers also match. Okay, then we talk about blacklist, we talk about whitelist, and we said that whitelist give an idea about the credibility of the journals, and I suppose any of us would not consider any Web of Science index journal disreputable. However, I have some questions about the reputation of the journal here, because they are accepting manuscripts, and only a few days after the acceptance of the manuscripts, they will be publishing this special issue. Think about the Taylor and Francis peer review process. The editor will receive the manuscript, pre-check, send 2 or 3 reviewers, receive feedback from reviewers, and then read them, and then contact authors, ask for revisions, resubmit to the editors, to the reviewers, and then collect feedback once again. If necessary, repeat the procedure once again, and then send it out for publication. Does this seem to be possible in a couple of weeks? I guess not. So this seems to be problematic here, which means that we shouldn't merely focus on white or black lists. Instead, we should take some responsibility as researchers here in order to interpret the situation. At this point, Irene, if you don't mind, I'd like to invite my colleague, Professor Ece Topkaya. As you already know, we already devoted this session to late Professor İsmail Hakkı Erten, who is the founder of Eurasian Journal of Educational Research. This journal is indexed by Emerging Sources Citation Index, and Professor Topkaya is acting as the editor of this journal. So at this point, I'd like to take some advice from Professor Topkaya regarding the precautions, I mean, how they encourage, how they promote academic integrity for their journals. Yes, please.
All right. Hello. Thank you for the invitation, Salim Hocam. Dr. Glendinning, hello. Thank you for the informative presentation so far. It really serves to strengthen our understanding of predatory publishing, and also what kind of standards we need to really keep in mind in detecting the journals' quality standards in terms of their adherence to high quality publishing again. Of course, İsmail Hocam's untimely passing is a genuine loss to the LT community in Turkey, and as well as to his numerous friends in the academia, including us. And I found myself acting as the editor-in-chief after his untimely passing. And, actually, I can easily say that the Eurasian Journal of Applied Linguistics, which was founded in 2015, before me had already had these publication ethics and standards. I can easily say, of course, İsmail Hocam, Professor Erten, already had an experience in publishing long before he founded Eurasian Journal of Applied Linguistics, because at Çanakkale 18 Mart University, where we currently work with Salim Hocam and I, he had this publication, history, because we already have our faculty of education journal there, and he was the founder of the journal as well. So, in short, starting from maybe late 2000s, he actually was inside the idea of publication and publishing and how standards should be set, etc. So for this reason, I think what he did was kind of carrying all those understandings, not just as an academic, adhering to the standards of publication ethics, but also as an editor. Started there at Çanakkale 18 Mart University, and then afterwards, actually he put all his understanding into practice in Eurasian Journal of Applied Linguistics. And by the way, this month, in a couple of days, we will be publishing our last volume of the year, issue of the year, which is dedicated to Professor Erten as well, and it's a special issue about the psychology of English language learning and teaching. As if I just go back to the publication ethics that we try to adhere in our journal, of course, as I said earlier, it is kind of carrying the torch of quality that already the founders, co-founders, and the assistant editors have built within the journal. So what do we do really there? Salim Hocam, you nicely, by giving an example from Tyler and Francis, actually, you nicely just summarized the peer review process. And of course, this is what we try to do in our journal as well. Surely there are certain frameworks that we follow. That is, for example, in terms of the COPs, that is the common common core practices, or rather. The COPE's best practice guidelines for journal editors, for example, again, our journal follows the standards by code, which is actually based on European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity. But of course, these all provide us with certain frames. And also recently, another development took place, which is by the agency, national agency, the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey, and underneath there is another body, which is LAKBİM, Turkish Academic Network and Information Center. And so one of the indices, the Turkish industry, basically TR industry, that we are also indexed in, it has updated their coverage criteria in early 2020 in terms of research ethics, and now it requires us to ask for complementary documents, for example, certain ethical forms and other things. So for this reason, these frames, basically the COP frame and LAKBİM's frame, all of these frameworks, of course, give us an understanding of what kind of standards we need to follow in terms of publication ethics. But of course, what we do, basically these are frameworks, but of course it's not just the policy documents that guide what you do in a journal. Rather, the human the human potential there, the human intentions there, basically what probably provides the backbone of the publication ethics of a journal. Well, what we do is, just like you have shown us the Taylor and Francis' standards, this is what we do as well. Well, once we receive a manuscript, assistant editors and we go through a very detailed technical check, very detailed at the same time, the similarity check using different tools. And then afterwards, of course, the scope check, etc. So we all go through all these checks. Unusually, I mean, it's not a very common, it's not very swift. So takes time. There are lots of discussions at the same time. The assistant editors and we're always in very much close contact in terms of whether a manuscript should be sent to a section editor. Only then, after we agree actually upon that the manuscript could be accepted to be sent to section editors, that the journey actually of the manuscript starts within the journal. So afterwards, I always take my time to carefully pick the section editor in the first place, because section editors have different academic interests. So I always try to match the manuscript scope and manuscript topic with the section editor's academic interest. So this is the very first thing. I think it requires some time, thinking, etc. So first of all, of course, the section editors. And then I always, if there are certain points that I would like to make and I would like to inform the section editor, I usually send a note. I say, well, I checked this part and that part, but I have some doubts about this part and that part. Of course, it's entirely up to you. The manuscript looks okay, but these are my points. Maybe some weaknesses. So the decision is yours. And then the section editor again goes through another stage. So I mean, the section editor, once she receives it from me, does not send it to peer review immediately. First of all, she goes through the manuscript as well. I usually recommend the section editors to do this very carefully, because of course I do not go into the manuscript in detail when I do the initial check. However, it's entirely their decision to complete this. So short, after the section editor decides that, okay, the manuscript could be sent to. So up to here, in terms of publication ethics, of course, as I said before, I mean, we go through it, we read it, we have the tools at the same time, the software, supporting our understanding of whether the manuscript adheres to the publication standards and ethics or not. We have these forms that LACFIM, the TR industry, the index actually wants us to submit to the index when we were doing our correspondence. So in short, there were a couple of steps that we need to keep in mind while we manage all this process. So and then afterwards, of course, the peer review starts. Completely double blind. For example, the OJS system, the Open Journal system, right now we're using does not allow us to assign one of us within the editorial board, actually one of us as peer reviewers. It's not possible. Of course, surely you can do something maybe to break those kind of codes, but still you cannot really assign you or another person from the editorial board as a peer reviewer. So it's totally double blind. And afterwards, of course, it continues, and the peer review continues in this way. We always, in terms of peer reviews and our reviewers, we always, again, maintain this close contact, and we always ask them to be, to be alert in terms of publication ethics at the same time. So this is how we handle in terms of keeping our quality standards regarding publication ethics within the Eurasian Journal of Applied Linguistics. One last thing, for example, maybe I can mention, a couple of people approached me in terms of how fast their publications, their manuscripts can be published. Or another person recently wrote to us, how much would it cost, if he sent his manuscript to be published. This was another email we received. Of course, there are certain, people approach you. This is a case, whether you're in the white list or in the black list, but there are some people approaching. So for this reason, again, I think it's not the framework, it's not the policies really, but it's really who the people are in that journal, what their standards, probably what their ethical standards, publication ethics standards are. This is really the most important part here. That is the intention of the people who run that journal. And one last maybe example is maybe I can give here is Salim Hocam's and his colleagues manuscript. Some time ago, they submitted a manuscript, and we sent, after the initial checks and the section editors checks and all that processes, we sent the section editor sent the manuscript to peer review, and the peer review returned with a suggestion of major reviews. Again, we just like we were mediating the process there between the manuscript, the peer review process, and the section editors and me, and we were openly, wrote to Salim Hocam and his colleagues the decision we arrived as a result of the peer review process, and we rejected the manuscript, and actually afterwards they withdrew in the first place of their manuscript. So this also shows, for example, how a conflict of interest can be handled, because of course there was this point, because we worked together at the same university, Salim and I, and so this might be regarded as a conflict of interest, but I think we were able to maintain our formal relationship there, that as academics involved in publication of our work, and I think this was a good maybe example to be given in terms of how formal relations can be maintained, although the manuscript owners can be your good and very close friends. So Salim Hocam, thank you for giving me this chance to talk about Eurasian Journal of Applied Linguistics and how we manage our publication, how we observe our publication ethics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ejojan, for all this explanation. So we now have better understanding of how the process works from the point of an editor. And thank you for mentioning about the rejection of our article, our manuscript. It's important, especially in countries like Turkey. I mean, we need to take cultural differences into consideration, and conflict of interest might be more important concern for us, for the academics in Turkey, compared to the other countries, to the European countries, for example, because people, authors, may get the decisions personal. However, as academics, we need to know that the journals, the editors are following certain rules, which do not change from person to person. So we need to be, as authors and as editors or as reviewers, any partners involved in this peer review process, we need to make sure that we are following the same criteria for any people. Okay, thank you. Now, Irene, would you please carry on with your section?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Continue. Okay, so if I can go to the next slide, I'm not going to go into these now because I think we probably will run out of time. But if you want to actually explore these links yourself in your own time, these are all examples of potentially predatory journals that I've been sent in recent years. That one there is a conference. The fourth one down is a conference, which has long since gone, but I've left it there so you can still go into the conference website and look at that one. So if you wanted to go in and in your own time and explore these and see if you can see the signs that we've been describing to you, and be forewarned and forearmed about those. So the next slide is a really interesting one, and actually Salim found this diagram rather than me, but it's quite an interesting one. So it's showing, I guess, in the darker colours are the higher prevalence. So what it's saying here is that over 8,000 predatory journals are listed here. Generating more than 400,000 articles each year. And a third of these are coming out of India, whether they're deceptively seen to be from elsewhere or not. But actually the USA is showing quite a lot of them. And there is a European country there that seems to have quite a lot as well. I can't identify what that European country is. Is it Poland? It's quite a big blob in Europe there in the middle. So that would be interesting to explore there. It could be Poland because it's listing on this side. It's saying these are the different subjects, the different academic disciplines, and then below these are the different languages that they're actually coming in. And most of these are in English, but there's quite a few in Russian, Polish, and other languages as well. So that sort of gives you an idea of the kind of where in the world these different journals are based, but they can be based anywhere. So this slide is just summarizing the different characteristics of and how to identify them. So there's a whole list of things here, and these are not just about publishers and journals, but also about meetings and congresses, conferences, and so on. And there are some characteristics that apply to them both. So I'm not going to read through all of those, but there's quite a lot on that slide. And it's things that we've probably talked through before, and I can't see anything that really is. But it also gives you a few ideas on the conferences as well, which we've talked about less. So these are things to look out for, to try and distinguish where you are good from, whether it's worth following up the invitation or not. And once you've seen a few, you begin to recognise them when they come through. Okay, so I think I'm handing back now to Salim. Salim?
Thank you, Irene. Here, I wanted to provide some examples from suspicious emails that I received from potentially predatory publishers. I'm just going to show them because I'd like to leave some room for questions. As you see, here's a call for paper from a journal, and they are referencing to a conference paper that I delivered. And repeatedly, they indicate that they are publishing this journal from the USA, so they'd like to increase the impact by using the country here. In addition to asking me to submit a manuscript, also they invite me to become a reviewer and to become editorial board member and with any other roles. Okay, moving to the next sample. And before I move to the next examples, I'd like to show you that if in case of any suspicion, you can check on the internet. For example, I realized a useful page, Ask a Librarian. And here you can retrieve some feedback about your suspicions regarding the reputability of the publisher. So this will lead you to decide whether to submit your manuscript or not. Another call for paper here, and you see they are publishing several related journals. I mean, the names are seem to be similar: International Journal of Research in Management, Economics and Commerce, International Journal of Research, Engineering, IT and Social Sciences, blah blah. So international is the keyword here. Again, they are indicating that they are publishing from USA, and they are publishing their journals monthly, not quarterly published. And even publication on demand, what does it mean? Why do they publish on demand? It doesn't make any sense. And also you see the impact factors, which cannot be true. Indeed, there will be no impact factors for these journals since they are not covered by Social Science Citation Index or Science Citation Index. There shouldn't be any impact factors associated with these journals. Here they are asking for reviewers and editors, another similar thing, and very frequently used terminologies such as international, here again representing several other journals. Again, they are referring to high impact factors, fast publication, and as you already acknowledged, Irene, irrelevant field. If I am an applied linguist, then any invitation should be related to my experience. Here I'm this time providing example from a conference call for paper. Again, any discipline, which means that they are inviting interdisciplinary, but there is no team bringing researchers together. Indeed, they are asking me to suggest myself as a keynote speaker. How does this happen? Because once you propose yourself as a keynote speaker, they will ask you to pay for the registration fee. This is another trick they use in order to attract participants. And another example, no information about invited speakers, no team again, and several locations, popular locations, especially touristical locations all over the world. And more importantly, and seems to be more dangerous this time, as it is highlighted here, this message seems dangerous because they claim free round-trip air ticket. Probably they will be asking for my credit card details, and there are some other concerns of credit card issues in addition to academic integrity problems. So anyway, that they should be avoided. Irene, Will you please summarize what we did today, and then we are going to ask a few people if they have any questions. I see that we have one important question from YouTube. Yes, please.
Okay, do you want to take the question first? Is there a question to take?
Okay, this should be fine. So let's give the priority to people on Microsoft Teams, to our students, if they have any questions or if they have any contributions, any short contributions, please do it now.
Okay, yes.
So in order to avoid these, not as researchers, but in order to prevent these happening, what in general can we do instead of, this removing or publish or perish stress or the incentives? Is there anything the broader organizations, governments can do to avoid these existing?
It's really important, and there are things that are out of your control that you can't do. I mean, in terms of what you can do is try and avoid using these sites altogether, and get guidance from your managers and the institutions. But what we're going to cover in the last few slides is some ideas of things that can be done at a much higher level and that should be done. And at the moment, I don't think there is enough awareness that this is going on at the right levels. So the actions are not being taken because this is a global problem. It's not something that one country can sort out themselves. So there needs to be a lot more awareness. So I guess without answering your question directly, perhaps in the next couple of slides we will start to address some of those issues that you raised there. And so, I mean, perhaps my first bullet point here is slightly strong, but I see it as this. I've been looking at academic publishing as an entity, and I say it's in a bit of mess. There's arguments about who pays for what. There's huge profits going to the big players here, and academics are putting a lot of effort into the publishing process for free. So there seems to be a kind of imbalance there about the effort that's going in and who's getting the profits from it. And this is all driving these predatory publishers. So that's one of the big problems. And a lot of research funding is going into the pockets of big publishing companies. And they are providing a really important, vital service for us. But there does seem to be an imbalance about where all the money is going. And a lot of money is draining out into the pockets of these predatory companies. I mean, if you look at the number of publications, the kind of annual rate of publications, it's enormous, the number of people that are using these services. And some of them are ignorant about, they think that is how you publish, maybe. But we don't know how many people are doing it in ignorance and how many people are doing it deliberately just to raise their publication rates. So that's the kind of point about the summary slide there. But in terms of the implications here, we can create whitelists and blacklists, but Beale's experience is not a pleasant one. So it's something for the whole academic community. And the last point on here is really important here. If we go to the last point first and then kind of look at the other ones, we need to raise awareness. And this is why sessions like this morning are really, really important, because there's not enough awareness about this. We've begun to raise awareness about contract cheating. That's been our campaign over the last few years. But this issue to do with predatory publishing is as important as that, because it actually is distorting the whole of the way academia works in terms of publications. So these are just a few suggestions, and these are things I can't do. It needs to be done by people who are responsible for decision making. So the first one here is create sensible metrics that define what are scholarly publishers and journals, and actually agree on those metrics. So it's the creation of those. Some of these metrics exist already, and there was quite an interesting paper published by COPE recently, which I haven't referenced in this one. I just remembered that one. We ought to include that there if it's not there already. That actually suggested some metrics. So I think that's quite an important one. So organisations like Retraction Watch and COPE are really, and PubPeer is the other one, are quite powerful in this respect, and they can help to try and drive this. But we need to kind of raise awareness. And then once we have these codes of conduct and rigorously apply those and make sure that everyone is following them, because at the moment the COPE codes of conduct are perfectly adequate and perfectly good if everyone followed them, and then we would know where we stood. We need to raise awareness on a national level and also the funding agencies, and they need to put pressure on the publishing industries in order to make sure all of these standards are followed. And through that, we need to discourage and ban the use of PPJs. And if that's done on an institutional level as well as a national level, it will have some impact. So if we stop using, if we actually stop including these predatory journals in these indexes and in these kind of white lists, that will help. But until we actually have a definition and we have a standard that everyone can use, we can't really do that. So remove all the incentives to using them is the biggest one of all. And some of those are at national level, some of them are at institutional level, some of them are even kind of internationally set. So I think that kind of summarises it. Perhaps that kind of answers the question to some extent. So on that, I'm going to hand back to Salim.
Okay, thank you, Irene. Before we close the session, I will transfer one question from YouTube. This is a question by my colleague, Professor Evren Erginal, and he's referring to open access publication. And in this session, we accentuated open access publication, one of the causes of for the emergence of possibly predatory publishers. Of course, we don't mean that open access publication is bad for the science, but it's the question of who is paying for what. And here, if you are talking about open access publication options, such as green open access or gold open access publication options, then there will be concerns related to funding. I mean, as a researcher who would like to publish in open access journals, reputable and with high impact open access journals, I need some funding. And I'm afraid there are some issues compared to the development levels of countries. I mean, the scientists, the academics who are working for prestigious universities or in developed countries seem to be advantageous compared to the other ones who are working in underdeveloped or developing countries. Therefore, low-income academics, academics from low-income countries seem to be disadvantaged. What do you think about this, and what might be your message to the publishers at this point?
So, Salim, are you asking me to answer that?
Yeah, yes, please, if possible.
I would say there should be preferential low rates for developing countries. So they should have discretion to offer lower fees or even remove the fees for developing countries for the right kind of papers to encourage publishing in those journals. So I would say that to the publishing industry as a whole, that affordability is really, really important.
Okay, thank you, Irene. Miranda is raising her hand. Yes, please.
If we are not out of time, I just want to make a comment and sort of pose a question in relation to culture, the lack of culture, and the relationship between culture and the explanations to predatory publishing. Because the idea that they are predatory, it's based on the view that academics are tricked into publishing with them. Though some authors may be aware even that the journal is poor and or even fraudulent, they still go on with publishing. And I see that there is I kind of feel that there could be a relationship between a lack of culture, which is not at the personal level, but also at societal level, and it comes from the governmental policies as well, and it's mirrored to the other circles in society, and this kind of provokes a lot of predatory publishing. As someone who comes from Kosovo and who now is a citizen of Turkey, I see major differences. Like in Turkey, there are strict governmental decisions and actions that promote this culture, and they are very clear, they are transparent, and universities apply them, and academicians are very aware of the fact that, you know, if they are going to publish with predatory journals, they won't gain any credit unless and even if they do so, I believe that it won't be for because it was deliberate, but it will happen only because by accident perhaps. But in countries like Kosovo, there is a lack of incentives by the government. There is a lack of incentives by the higher education institutions to promote this culture. And people are not aware of that, and they are not trained for that. And so it happens, and there is a lot of relationship between this culture and the corruption and predatory publishing as well, I believe.
Thank you, Miranda. Especially, I'd like to refer to Kosovo because Irene also referred to this country. And Irene said that she delivered some seminars in Kosovo, and Jeffrey Bell also delivered some other seminars in order to increase the familiarity with academic integrity and for the prevention of possibly predatory publishers. Last year, I had the chance to deliver a keynote speech there with Tracy Bretak, and I know that we have under European Network for Academic Integrity, we have several members from Kosovo, and they are making some progress. Irene, I see that your efforts are. I want to
build on that, because it's easy to point the finger at Kosovo because they are doing something, and therefore that's why I've been there, because I was there at the invitation of the Council of Europe, and Jeffrey Beale was there at the invitation of an anti-corruption group called Orca, as in, you know, it's actually the same as the animal, and their name is in kind of the Yugoslav language, but they are working very hard to try and change things there. So I think we mustn't point at a single country that we've been to and say they are corrupt, because actually they are one of the few countries that are doing something about it. But yes, they have a big corruption problem in Kosovo culturally, and also I've been to Albania, which is quite similar in culture, and I've been to other countries in the kind of former Yugoslavian countries, and I've also been to other countries that are not part of that region where there is high rates of corruption, and they all have the same kind of problems here. And the point here is that, as Miranda correctly points out, it's up to the governments and the institutions to start to do something about that. So the more awareness is raised, the more can be done. But it would be great to get some kind of international movement going, and to get the awareness out there and start to get some changes made. And it's going to take some time, because changing cultural things is really, really hard.
Thank you, Irene. Before we close, I have a very quick question, if you don't mind, please, from YouTube. This time, Özgür Çelik is asking about the methods of blacklist. What do you think about the methodology? Now, they are running anonymously, but personally, what is your perception regarding the methodology? I mean, would you trust blacklists, the methods that they follow?
I don't know enough about them, to be honest. I know that Jeffrey Beale was quite scrupulous about the way he was running it until he closed it. But he was just constantly criticised for what he was doing, and people were anti even the term predatory journals. So you make yourself a target by running a blacklist. It's a very brave thing to do. And so I really respect anyone who decides to run a blacklist. I think you've got to be a judge for yourself on these, but you use the blacklist or the whitelist as a guide, but always be aware of the fact that there are false entries within any list, and they may be badly or wrongly categorized. And so you just need to be aware of what the factors are, and just be wary of anything that comes to you, and look at the characteristics that we've described here is my best guidance to you.
Okay, thank you, Irene. So we came to the end of our session today. I'd like to specifically thank you, Irene, for joining us here today. I'd like to thank you, Ece Hocam, for sharing your experiences as an editor here, and I'd like to thank to all my PhD students, and also I'd like to thank to all audience who joined us via YouTube. Thank you all, and hope to see you next week for another session.
And thank you very much for inviting me, Salim, and nice to meet you all.
It's our pleasure, a real pleasure to host you here, Irene. Take good care, please. Okay, bye-bye.